Welcome back to Ion Foxborough. I'm Chris Mason here with Mark Daniels. We are back from a very eventful week in Indianapolis. Mark, how you doing, man?
I think I'm still a little tired, Chris. I'm still catching up on some sleep. So we have a week here before free agency. So we are going to rest up before things get a bit nuts. But yeah, last week in Indy was fun, Chris. I thought it was I would say I'd call it fruitful. I think me and you we learned a lot, at MassLive, and hopefully people who read us, learned something as well.
Yeah, definitely. And we published our what we were hearing at the combine thing on Sunday. Felt like a lot of people were willing to talk, a lot of different sources in there. And like just to get into it right off the bat, we heard that they're still looking to pair a veteran quarterback with a rookie. Some names that jumped out were Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew, and Joe Flacco, which really makes sense in that bridge quarterback type deal. And then one other name that was popping up quite a bit was Baker Mayfield. What did you make of the Baker Mayfield inclusion, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. There were some people connected to the Patriots who weren't quiet, about their like or maybe even love for Baker Mayfield, and that makes sense. I mean, Baker worked with Patriots' new offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt. He worked with their Patriots' new quarterback coach TC McCartney. He also worked with Ben McAdoo for a little bit in Carolina, and when he was drafted in Cleveland, Elliott Wolf was the assistant GM, and Alonzo Highsmith was also in that front office. So there are so many Patriot connections to Baker Mayfield. A level of interest is sort of expected. They like Baker Mayfield. I'm saying Baker Mayfield is a good quarterback. You could do a lot worse than having Baker as your starter. Chris, I did talk to someone not too long ago inside the building about Baker Mayfield, who another person told me, "Hey, yeah, I also like Baker Mayfield." The issue here is the money. From what people are hearing at the combine, it's not just maybe 30 million Baker gets. It could reach as high as 40 million per season for Baker Mayfield. Now, the Patriot source I talked to said that he would be surprised, even shocked, if the Patriots were to commit that type of money towards Baker. And that's why he would be surprised if the Patriots, actively and aggressively pursued Baker Mayfield and free agency opens up next week. So Baker Mayfield, yes, people around in Gillette Stadium really, really like him. Makes sense again with the context. However, my understanding with when it comes to the Patriots' plan and how they want to spend money in free agency, they aren't expected to throw that much money at Baker. 40 million, Chris, is a lot of money, and I think on like the opposite end of that is all right. You could give Baker 40 million, and you could have your starting quarterback, or you could sign a bridge backup quarterback like Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Brissett, and pair him with a rookie, and then allocate your money around the quarterback position. And everything I understand, that's the direction they're heading. They're going to spend money in free agency, but from the people I talked to, it would be surprised if it was 40 million for Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, I think it's one thing to like Baker as a player and to say that as much, but it's another to make that your free agent plan. And I think you're starting to see some things that point to maybe him going back to Tampa Bay too, where Mike Evans re-signed there today. Mike Evans' agent was very public about him not wanting to play with a rookie quarterback. Okay, he signs back in Tampa. Does that indicate that Baker is already also going back there? Like, there's some things like that that seem to jump out and make sense. And yeah, there are just so many holes in the roster. It'd be really interesting philosophically if this had been like a 500 team last year that only had a couple other holes. It's like, okay, well then do you go the Baker route and think that you're like that close? But it's pretty clear that this is not like a Band-Aid type fix, right? Like we've
Right.
talked about this before, but they're really going to be contending in like 2025, not 2024. So why are you spending your money that way if you're trying to rebuild things slowly? It just doesn't really add up to me that way.
It doesn't. And think about it too. The Patriots are actually you have a teams who have a quarterback on a rookie deal. It's honestly it's a benefit. It is a benefit because quarterbacks cost so much in today's NFL, Chris, that like yeah, one day maybe the Patriots have to dedicate 40 to 50 million on a quarterback. That could come if you get the right guy. But also that's a large chunk of money to allocate to one player. I would argue Baker isn't worth it, but you're right. If you're a team like Tampa Bay, and that you were in the playoffs last year with him. You have veteran players around him. It makes sense to keep Baker. But for the Patriots, other than people who really like him, I don't think that like salary wise, it's the wisest thing. It would be I don't think it would be the wisest thing for Elliott Wolf to do.
Right. And it's also with Baker, it's like really 1 year of production here that he was back to being, kind of the quarterback that he was billed as, where it's not long ago that he did flame out in Cleveland, then was in Carolina, then was in LA, and he's been all over the place. Like, I think that he found his footing in Tampa Bay, and I think he probably realizes that too, right? Like it's a good situation for him there. He's finally building some momentum. Why wouldn't he want to stay there? Now, if his market totally craters, that's like the one scenario where I could actually see the Patriots being a player for him if it doesn't materialize at all. And then it's like, oh, well, we can have Baker for, I don't know, 15 or 20 million instead of 40 million or whatever. Then I think they would consider that more seriously. But I just don't think that's going to happen. Do you?
No, I agree. I think if, the Baker to the Patriots, I think would heat up if, like you said, his market isn't there. If it's a situation where you're right, he would take a deal for around 20 million, then I think that's a really good discussion to have. So if you're Elliot Wolf, do you sign Baker Mayfield to a deal that would be around 20 million, allocate more money around him, and then you can trade down from number three or select Marvin Harrison Jr. or select the top tackle Joel Alt. That would be an intriguing situation. I wouldn't hate Baker Mayfield for around that 20 million a year mark. It's just a matter if that actually happens. As they say sometimes at the combine, it is lying season. So we'll see if Baker gets close to 40 million a year. But I agree with you. The fact that Mike Evans re-signed, I think that's another signal that Baker's going to go back to Tampa Bay.
And again, like if his market totally craters and he's taking a $20 million deal, why would he want that in New England where you're like facing a huge rebuild? Like I know he has some familiarity with the coaching staff, but like looking around, if you have like 20 million here or 20 million somewhere else, I think the somewhere else is probably going to be more appealing and a better setup than what New England can offer him right now.
And like, why would New England be a better option than Tampa Bay with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin? It's not. Like, you know what I mean? Tampa Bay is set up to get back to the playoffs. The Patriots are set up to be a long-term rebuild. Very, very clear cut for me.
So of the quarterbacks that we heard, the one that I think just still makes by far the most sense is Jacoby Brissett. Um, I just think that he is the perfect bridge here where if you draft a rookie, you don't have to rush him. He'll compete with Jacoby. And then like ultimately, I think he makes more sense than Flacco. Like Brissett is still a quality quarterback. Like he's a good backup and a fine like band-aid starter if you need him for a couple games. Like I think his ability right now is significantly higher than Joe Flacco's. Where do you come in on this?
Yeah, I mean, Jacoby Brissett makes sense. He has a connection with TC McCartney and Alex Van Pelt. So he obviously has a lot of connections here in New England. Jacoby would be great for a rookie quarterback. He's a really good guy. You want to pair your rookie quarterback with a veteran quarterback who will help him, who will act like a mentor. I think Jacoby would just be, phenomenal in that backup role for the Patriots. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a decent market for him too, because there's a lot of teams that could use quarterback depth. But I agree. I think Jacoby could be one of the targets, one of the top targets when it comes to being a backup quarterback. I wouldn't rule out Gardner Minshew either, Chris. I definitely heard that there are people inside, the building who like him. Gardner, I mean, a year ago, the Indianapolis Colts sort of did what the Patriots are kind of planning on doing. They had Gardner Minshew and they paired him with a rookie quarterback, a first rounder, and Anthony Richardson. And when Richardson went down, Gardner Minshew comes in and he went 7-6 as a starter. Now you're in Pro Bowl alternate honors, which really means nothing. But the fact that he won 7 games last year, I mean, that tells you right there that if like your rookie quarterback isn't prepared or ready to start, you could start Gardner Minshew and you could probably be better than you were a year ago, right? Like I don't think Gardner Minshew would be a bad backup, and I think the Colts found that to be similar or be the case last year. I mean, obviously he beat the Patriots in Germany, but yeah, I
That game was
agree.
so bad.
It was so bad. But I agree. Kobe Brissett would really be an ideal backup. As of right now, I wouldn't rule out Gardner Minshew either. But I think both would, give the Patriots a bridge starter, and I think probably the best way to go.
I agree with you there. And I do think it's kind of funny though, the Pro Bowl alternate thing where like there's one
Yeah.
every year, whether it's Mac Jones in 2021, Snoop Huntley 2022, Gardner Minshew 2023. It always feels like there's one like Pro Bowl quarterback you're like, huh, all right. But moving on to some other things that we heard there too. One was that the Patriots are looking to shop Devontae Parker, which I think makes all the sense in the world because you're trying to quote weaponize that room. You need the snaps for someone else. Do you think they'll be able to get anything for Parker on the trade market?
They're about to find out because at the NFL trade deadline last year, they had no interest for Devontae Parker or Juju Smith-Schuster, and the people I talked to didn't expect there to be much interest for Juju based on his contract. I believe his cap hits around 12 million this year. that's where Devontae Parker comes into play. His cap hit is more manageable. It's around 6 million. The Patriots are sort of in a tough spot though, Chris. I mean, if you could take a seventh, maybe they do it. I don't know how much trade value he has. He hasn't been productive and he hasn't been that healthy, and his cap hits around 6 million. I wonder if that's a case where they just end up eating it and cutting him. But I agree, the Patriots need to redo their wide receiver room, and I think that starts with moving on from Parker or Smith-Schuster. Considering Smith-Schuster's contract, I really think it will be Parker if any team is willing to trade for him. I mean, it'll be fascinating to see what happens there. There's a part of me that'll be surprised if someone really wants him, just because although in spurts Devontae can be a productive receiver, he just hasn't been healthy and he's getting older. He's what is he, 30 years old? Like, yeah, I think if the Patriots have an offer, they will do it. I'm just not convinced they're going to, you know? So, I mean, we're going to find out, but it would really take someone that really covets, Devontae Parker and his abilities as an X receiver to make the move. I don't know if it's there.
Right, and we're getting further and further away from the 2019 season, which was his really productive year. And I mean, I think the farther away from that you get, the more you think like that's the exception, not the rule with Parker, right? So it sounds like one way that they could try to continue revamping this wideout room is in free agency, where you wrote about this morning. There aren't a ton of big names out there. Are there any that catch your ear right off the bat?
I mean, in that ideal world, they can negotiate with Calvin Ridley and Michael Pittman, who would by far give them, I'd say a number one receiver. That's the avenue to do it. Elliot Wolf said he wants to weaponize the offense. Gerard Mayo says they want to bring in someone who has to be double covered. My question is how? How do you do that? I talked to people who, quite honestly, Chris, they weren't very sure how the Patriots were going to accomplish this. There is an expectation that Michael Pittman is going to stay in Indy. Chris Ballard wouldn't rule out using the franchise tag if they couldn't re-sign him. With Calvin Ridley, it's interesting because if the Jaguars bring him back, they owe Atlanta a second round pick. If Ridley leaves, they owe Atlanta a third round pick. But Trent Baalke, Jacksonville GM, said that like that didn't factor into the equation, and they were currently negotiating with Calvin Ridley as well. I talked to people who thought Ridley would not be available, and same with Pittman. So I've been asking around. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, who's the next available best receivers? And honestly, it's like Marquise Hollywood Brown and Gabe Davis are probably at the top of the list. I couldn't get a great feel on how the Patriots feel about them. I was told by one person they didn't expect the Patriots to pursue Marquise Hollywood Brown. There are some other interesting guys out there. Tyler Boyd from Cincinnati, who's been a 1,000-yard receiver in the past. He's a little bit older. I could see the Patriots liking him. Another one is Noah Brown from Houston. Noah Brown had really an interesting season. He finished with over 500 yards, but really the bulk of that came in 2 weeks. He caught, I have it right here, it was 6 passes for 153 yards against Tampa Bay. The next week, it was 7 catches for 172 yards. So like Noah Brown in 2 weeks looked like a bona fide number one. Now that was when I believe Nico Collins was hurt. He was filling in for him and he was playing opposite of Tank Dell and he had CJ Stroud, right? But Noah Brown could be an option for the Patriots to add some depth there. I don't think that's a signing that would get Patriots fans too excited. But I mean, I think the Patriots are going to have to explore all these different avenues and really say, all right, do we just do it with Marquise Hollywood Brown, or do we go with Gabe Davis, or do we, go with some of these secondary guys, Noah Brown, Tyler Boyd? It's fascinating to me, but I think unfortunately, these top guys aren't going to be available. I mean, Chris, do you think should they look to like trade for someone? Like, how do they go about weaponizing the offense? Because frankly, Chris, when I asked, people didn't have an answer for me.
If Brandon Ayuk is available in trade talks, that's somebody that I would definitely target. I mean, I think right now, best case scenario is Ridley makes it to free agency and you go after him there because you're in a rebuild. You don't want to have to give up picks. But if you do, and if that's the way, and ultimately, if you have to like send a deal to San Francisco to try and get someone like Ayuk, I would do that just because I think that you need the talent at receiver and it's just not there. And as we're outlining, there's no real avenue where like, are you really going to get that excited if they sign Gabe Davis? We've seen Gabe Davis so many times in Buffalo. The drops are always there. I don't see him as like a weaponizing the offense kind of guy. Do you?
No, not at all. Honestly, I would offer San Fran a 2025 first for Brandon Ayuk. That being said, San Fran's GM John Lynch did say they were working on an extension, and that was part of their goals, which makes sense. Brandon Ayuk's a really good player, but if San Francisco doesn't think they can get it done, now Brandon Ayuk is in a contract year and they're going to trade him, the Patriots should pounce. Honestly, I would give up a future first, absolutely.
So the Patriots have over $100 million in free agency, even if they don't spend all of it, which Gerard kind of walked back when he was talking to Karen last week. They're still going to have to spend some of it, and I think I think it would make a lot of sense to spend some of that on a tackle. And it's not a great tackle class, but we heard that Tyron Smith is somebody that's expected to garner interest from the Patriots. Is that a move that you would make?
Yeah, 100%. I think it makes so much sense. From my understanding, the Patriots view this tackle class pretty clear at the top. Patriots think Michael Wynn is the best available tackle free agent, and what I was told is they think Tyron Smith is the next available. You know what? Michael Wynn was the right tackle, and Tyron Smith, Chris, is a left tackle, right? Makes pretty clear sense to me. Now, Tyron Smith is a second team All Pro last year. He's also 33. So, what he would bring you is a short term solution at left tackle. You bring back Michael Wenu, that gives you your starting right tackle. But then in the draft, where tackles are said to be very talented this year, you draft a tackle and you have him develop behind Tyron Smith for a year, maybe two, probably a year, right? I mean, so yeah, absolutely. I know the Patriots like him. I expect the Patriots to pursue Tyron Smith. The question I have, though, is at 33 years old, can you convince Tyron Smith to come to a rebuild? I don't know. I don't know. Like, I think you'd have to maybe overpay and clearly give him his best offer. But if
Yep.
I'm Tyron Smith, I'd want to go to Kansas City. You know what I mean? Like, I expect the Patriots to approach him when free agency opens, since they have him, graded so highly. I'm just not entirely sure it fits with based on who the player is.
I think money can talk here, and if it's one of the last deals he's going to get, I think that he might want to, totally max out. And the Patriots are in a position where they can overpay someone like this on a short-term deal. And I think that draft plan is perfect. Take your rookie quarterback in the first, take a tackle in the second, let the tackle develop behind Smith on Wenu. Don't force him in there right away. And I really think that you're making the right steps there if that's how you attack this. And I'm not sure that you know, Kansas City, of course, is going to be attractive to anybody who ever hits free agency because you're playing with Patrick Mahomes. But at this point, I don't know how motivated Smith is just for to play for a contender. Because if he was, then wouldn't he have just stayed in Dallas? I mean,
Good
say
point.
what you will about Dallas and the playoff choke jobs, but they're in the playoffs every year, no matter what, right? And
Right.
so if you're comfortable there and they're a contender and you're still like, oh, I'm going to free agency, I'm going to hit the market, that tells me that he wants to cash out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you bring up a good point. And if it's not Tyrone Smith, I wonder if they'd look at Cincinnati's Jonah Williams. Not nearly as talented as Tyrone Smith, but he's someone that could give you, at the very least, an average left tackle. And that's what you need. I don't think you can go into the draft saying, "Hey, man, we need a starting tackle." It's a really dangerous place to be with that position specifically.
Agreed. And so you touched on Wenu there, where it sounds like the team has reached out to him and reached out to Kyle Duggar, and it's not just lip service. Where Mayo and Wolf last week both said like we want these guys back. It seems like they are actually actively working to bring them back. How far
Yeah.
along do you think those are?
It's a really great question. The Patriots' priority, from my understanding, is bringing back Kyle Duggar and Michael Wenu. They want both of them back. They would love to have them locked up before free agency. It's really hard to guess, man. I think both of them want to enter free agency and check out the market, frankly. I wouldn't rule out the franchise tag. I think Phil Perry wrote today on NBC Sports Boston that his understanding was that the franchise tag wasn't ruled out. For if I'm the Patriots, that's Mike Uwenu. And I understand 21 million is a ton of money. The Patriots need two tackles, Chris. Like I honestly, if I'm them, I franchise Mike Uwenu tomorrow if you can't get it done. You can't lose him. And it's like one thing, like if you were to lose Kyle Duggar, I think replacing a safety is easier than replacing a tackle. You know what I mean? Like it's like I saw Phil read that. When Phil wrote that, I was like, it makes sense that it's not off the table. I mean, you really have to sort of balance here. What happens if we lose Mike Uwenu because the options aren't great?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally on board with that too, where those are the two internal free agents who you really, really want to keep. But I do feel like Duggar would be more of a luxury tag as opposed to Onwenu, who's an absolute necessity to keep him in the building, keep him around. And it was interesting philosophically last week listening to Elliott basically being like, yeah, no, the tag is not off the table. Of course, like we're going to explore everything. And then Mayo the former player seem more reluctant with the tag, where he's like, we want these guys to be happy. We don't want, I think when Mayo was a player, five of his teammates got tagged, and so he saw how like getting tagged can make guys feel and make them react. But at this point, you just can't afford to lose them. You can't afford to lose on Wenu. So I think the tag makes all the sense in the world if you can't come to an agreement by tomorrow when that deadline hits.
It's business, it's not personal. It's $20 million. I mean, listen, if
Right.
Mike gets tagged, he has 21 million reasons to be happy, you
Right. And
know?
that's 21 million guaranteed too. That's you're not going to do better than that for 2024. And I understand wanting the long-term deal and more guaranteed like that, but in the short term, he can't do any better than that. That's exactly what you're looking for.
No. Agreed, man.
All right. Well, that's our pod. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you guys further on down the trail.